Hello friends, welcome back to Dr. Jaggi's Academy. In continuation with the pathophysiology chapters, I am going to discuss today about the very important disease that is tuberculosis. So this is the first part of the tuberculosis. In the second part, I will discuss about the other aspects of tuberculosis in the next video. So now, let's start. So first I will just go for the definition of the tuberculosis. First word that I have written is the communicable. That means the disease can be spread from one person to the another person. So it is a communicable disease. Second thing I have written chronic. That means it is not an acute disease, it is a chronic disease. It persists for a period of time. And granulomatous disease. This disease is characterized by the presence of granuloma. I will discuss about the granuloma in the subsequent slides. So it is a communicable, chronic, granulomatous disease. So that means, and this is the causative microorganism. Mainly it is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is the main cause of the tuberculosis. Now, as I told about the granulomatous disease. Now the characterization of this granuloma is by the histological. Histological means you take out the tissue, make a slide, see under the microscope. So when we see under the microscope histologically, then it is called as then we define it. Okay. So how we define it? Histologically, it is characterized by the presence of granuloma. So now, because of the presence of granuloma, it is called as granulomatous disease. Is tuberculosis only disease in which there is a granuloma? No, there are some other diseases like we are having the leprosy, we are having the syphilis in which there is also a granuloma. So more about the granuloma, what we mean by this term granuloma. So I am showing with the help of this diagram. I will show one by one. The main feature of this granuloma is the presence of these epithelioid cells. These epithelioid cells, these ones. What is these epithelioid cells? Actually, these are the macrophages. You know, macrophages are round in shape, but in tuberculosis, in the granuloma, these macrophages they become relatively flat. They become like the epithelial cells. So those macrophages which appear like the epithelial cells, they are called as the epithelioid cells. Another feature is the presence of giant cell. This one, giant cell. This is a giant cell. What is a giant cell? Giant cell is formed by merging of number of epithelioid cells. 5, 10, 15 epithelioid cells, they merge and form a giant cell. So there you can see number of nuclei in this giant cell. So now one feature is the presence of epithelioid cells. They collect in the center. There are giant cells. Now these epithelioid cells are surrounded by the lymphocytes. You can see these are the lymphocytes. They are surrounding the epithelioid cells, and these lymphocytes, they are surrounded by the outer layer which is called as the fibrous layer. So obviously there are three things: epithelioid cells in the center, giant cells surrounded by the lymphocytes, and then the fibrous layer. Now there is granuloma. Sometime in the granuloma there is a caseous necrosis. As you remember, I discussed about different kind of necrosis, coagulative, liqueficative, and the caseous necrosis. Caseous means cheese-like material. Sometime in the granuloma, in the center there is a necrotic portion, cheese-like portion. So if it is present, then it is called as granuloma with the caseous necrosis. So this is the typical feature of the tuberculosis if you see under the microscope. Now, what are the organs which are affected in the tuberculosis? Mainly, the lungs are the main target, but not only the lungs, other organs are also affected like bones, brain, fallopian tubes, urinary tract. These kind of things they start involving as the disease is progressing. So now coming down to the prevalence of tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is mainly a disorder that is occurring disease that is taking place in the economically weak countries, in the poor countries. Because there is overcrowding, there is poor sanitation, they are living in the not in a good areas. So obviously you can say this is one of the major causes of death in the economically weak countries. But tuberculosis is not a common problem in the clean and developed nations, but obviously a very problematic condition in the developing countries like India. Etiology. So, as I told, the infection is caused by mycobacterium. There are many species of mycobacterium which can produce tuberculosis. The most important species that I already told, that is the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the most common species that is causing the tuberculosis. But there is another thing, another species which is called as Mycobacterium avium intracellular. It produces tuberculosis particularly if the person is suffering from AIDS or the immune system is weak, that is immunocompromised persons. Another one, Mycobacterium bovis. It is affected, you can say it is transmitted by use of the contaminated milk, and it produces the tuberculosis of intestine. Another one, Mycobacterium africanum, which produces the tuberculosis in the African countries. So now I will discuss some of the characteristics of mycobacteria. This mycobacteria is aerobic, that means it needs oxygen. Then it is non-motile, it is not moving as such, and it is rod-shaped bacilli. So it is a rod-shaped bacilli. Another important point is that normally if you take a bacteria, you use a stain which is called as gram stain. So some bacteria, they are gram positive, some are gram negative. But these mycobacteria, they are not stained with the help of gram staining, weakly stained with gram stain. So why they are not stained with gram stain? Because the mycobacteria, they contain very high lipids and the mycolic acid in their cell wall. That is why they are not stained with the usual dye gram stain. So in order to visualize these, we need some special stains which are called as Ziehl-Neelsen stain or the quinone stains. So if you use these kind of stains, you take this bacilli, what you will see the bright red color of the bacilli, and the background will be blue, like this one. This is the blue background, and you will see these kind of the rod-shaped bacilli. Now, you stain the bacilli with these kind of the dyes, then you try to wash with the help of the acidic solution. But what you will see, even after the washing with the acidic solution, color is not faded, color still retained. So that is why they are called as acid fast bacilli. That means the dye is not faded with the acidic. So now I just want to differentiate bacteria and the mycobacteria, because bacteria is common. There is another word, that is myco. So I will discuss what are the main differences between the bacteria and mycobacteria. As I told, it is called as myco because it has high mycolic acid content in the cell wall. But this mycolic acid is not important in the cell wall of the bacteria. Second thing, if you take the bacteria, they multiply very fast. Some bacteria, they multiply within 20 minutes. They double their number within 20 minutes. Or usually you can say they double in less than 1 hour. So they multiply at a faster rate. But these multiply at a slower rate. So they may take at least 16 to 20 hours to multiply. But they take less than 1 hour. Sometimes they take 20 minutes also, as I told earlier. So as I told, if you take the bacteria, normally we stain with the help of the gram staining. But they are weakly stained with the gram stain. So now, as I told, it is a communicable disease. So that means this disease can be transmitted from one person to another person. So it is transmitted through the air. So it is an airborne infection. So that means it is transmitted from one person to another by the airborne droplets. From where these airborne droplets are coming when the person is coughing, spitting, speaking or sneezing. So infected person release these droplets in the air. So another person can get these droplets from the air, and the bacteria can be transmitted from one person to the another person. So that is why, as I told, it is more common in the overcrowded places, which are mainly taking place in the developing or the poor countries. So now I just want to differentiate a word, infection versus the disease. Infection is different, disease is different. Infection means when the microorganism is present in the body, but it doesn't mean the person is having the symptoms of the disease. It may have or it may not be. So that means microorganism is present, but person may have the symptoms or may not have the symptom. But you say person is infected. But when you say active disease, now the disease is characterized by presence of symptoms. When the symptoms of tuberculosis are present, then you say it is a disease. Now another important point is that if the person is infected but it doesn't have the you can say the symptoms, then it cannot transmit the infections from one person to another person. That means without the symptoms, the infection is not transmitted. But if the person is having the active disease, then disease can be spread from one person to another person. So this is the key difference between the infection and the disease, particularly in the tuberculosis. So now, what are the clinical symptoms of tuberculosis? So symptoms we can classify into three types. One is the systemic symptoms. Systemic means which are pertaining to whole body. Then there are some localized pulmonary symptoms, because as I told, in tuberculosis the lungs are mainly involved. So sometimes we can have the symptoms just only in the lungs. Okay, that is pulmonary symptom. But sometimes the disease spreads away from the lungs. From the lungs it spreads to other parts of the body. Then you can have the extrapulmonary symptoms. So now going down to the first one, systemic symptoms. In the systemic symptoms, what are the things? You can have the malaise. You can say malaise means the person is not feeling good. Anorexia, no appetite for the food. There can be the weight loss because the person is not having the food, he is not taking the food for like regular time. Weight loss, sweating. Then fever is there, but this fever is low grade. It is not very high fever, low grade and intermittent. Intermittent means the fever is not continuously present throughout the day. So the fever will come and it will disappear. That means it will appear late in the afternoon and then it will subside. So this kind of a fever which is not continuous, this is called as intermittent fever. So these are the common symptoms: sweating, low grade fever, intermittent fever, weight loss, anorexia and malaise. These are the general systemic symptoms of the tuberculosis, but you cannot differentiate that from these symptoms that the person is suffering from tuberculosis, because these are the general symptoms that happen in number of diseases. Now there are some localized pulmonary symptoms, symptoms which are related to the lungs. Now what is the thing? Now there is a prolonged cough. The person is having the cough for a very long period of time, and it is not a dry cough. It is a productive cough. There is a sputum that is coming outside. And this sputum is mucoid. That means initially it is more of a watery and little bit of the mucus, but later on it becomes purulent. That means in that sputum there is a pus as the disease is progressing. And later on this sputum start containing the blood. So that means you see, in the mild condition sputum is just a mucus. Then it becomes more viscous, purulent, and later on blood start appearing in the sputum. That is hemolysis. Then because person is coughing for a long period of time, so the pain start appearing around the chest in the pleural cavity. So this is called as pleuritic pain. There is an intense pain in the chest area. So now there are extrapulmonary symptoms. So if the disease spreads to other organs, so that means symptoms pertaining to other organs. And we use a word, this is called as miliary tuberculosis. Miliary tuberculosis means when the disease has widespread to different parts of the body. Okay, so that is the miliary tuberculosis. I will just show what are the things can be there in the miliary tuberculosis. So like if there is systemic miliary tuberculosis, one of the things which is involved is the tuberculous osteomyelitis. That means, or it is called as sports disease. It means it is causing the, it is affecting the bones, osteomyelitis. Tuberculosis has gone to the bones. I will discuss this pathway. Now, systemic miliary tuberculosis, widespread dissemination of the disease. As I told, it can involve the skeletal muscles. And which skeletal muscles are involved? It is called as tuberculous osteomyelitis or the Port's disease. And most of the time, it involves the vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae, these kind of things. And ultimately, it may lead to the destructions of the bone. Then, it may involve the genital tract. Like it may involve the fallopian tubes, it involve the endometrium, and if these kind of the things are there, and if it happens in the young age, it can lead to the infertility. Then, systemic miliary tuberculosis can also go into the brain or in the CNS system. Then it can cause the involvement of the infection of the meninges. Meninges, you know, these are the coverings of the brain and the spinal cord, and it may lead to the meningitis. It may also cause the infection in the urinary tract. It may cause involvement of the kidney, renal tuberculosis, which may cause the renal failure. So this is all about the tuberculosis in the first part. In the next part of the tuberculosis, I will be focusing mainly on the pathogenesis and the different manifestations of the tuberculosis. Thank you.